At a lavish party in the heart of New York, the glittering chandeliers cast a radiant glow over the faces of the powerful elite. The clinking of wine glasses mingled with sophisticated laughter, filling the air with an aura of grandeur. Ethan Carver, a wealthy and self-assured businessman, stood at the center of the crowd, his sharp eyes constantly scanning for opportunities to assert his dominance. Victory was his old friend, whether in business, in life, or in the games he invented for himself. Competition fueled his arrogance, and Ethan had never tasted defeat. That night, amidst the scent of expensive perfume and flattery floating around him, his best friend Daniel approached, a mischievous grin playing on his lips. "Ethan, I bet you wouldn't dare do this," Daniel said, his voice dripping with challenge, his eyes twinkling as if he'd just hatched a wild idea. Ethan raised an eyebrow, intrigued but unshaken. He was no stranger to provocations, they only ignited his excitement. "What's the bet?" he replied, his tone brimming with confidence as if he were already prepared to crush any challenge thrown his way. Daniel lifted his wine glass, the light refracting through the crystal, accentuating his sly expression. "I bet you $1 million," he declared, "that you don't have the guts to marry a woman completely unlike your type, and live with her for at least 6 months." For a fleeting moment, Ethan froze, the smile on his face stiffening. He was notorious for dating only breathtakingly beautiful women, slender, flawless figures who seemed to step straight out of a fashion magazine. A challenge like this was clearly beyond his comfort zone. But then, his competitive instinct roared to life. Ethan smirked, a spark of pride flashing in his eyes. "Interesting," he said, his voice low but resolute. "And if I win, you'll pay dearly, Daniel." Daniel let out a hearty laugh, clinking his glass against Ethan's as if sealing a fateful deal. "Go ahead and try. I'll be waiting to watch you fail," Daniel shot back, his tone laced with mockery. The woman Daniel chose for this wager was Mia Harper, a name Ethan had never encountered. Unlike anyone he'd ever dated, Mia didn't fit society's celebrated mold of beauty. She was overweight, but that didn't diminish her confidence or the fierce personality Ethan would soon come to know. To him, this was just another transaction, a game to prove that nothing could escape his control. Without a second thought, Ethan nodded in agreement. The thrill of the bet surged through him, like adrenaline before a high-stakes match. He was certain he'd win, as he always had, oblivious to the fact that this decision would transform his life in ways he could never have imagined. A few days after the bet was sealed at that extravagant party, Ethan Carver received detailed information about the woman he'd be facing in this challenge. Mia Harper. A curt email from Daniel, his best friend and the mastermind behind this game, offered the first sketch of who she was. Mia wasn't the type Ethan typically noticed. She was overweight, lacking the ethereal beauty or seductive charm he was accustomed to in his world. But it wasn't her appearance that caught his attention. It was the description of her character, confident, independent, and possessing a will so strong it bordered on unyielding. Those words echoed in his mind like an unspoken challenge, stirring a curiosity he couldn't ignore. Ethan had always been the one in control of billion-dollar deals, fleeting relationships, everything. But now he wondered if he could bend someone like Mia to his will. The thought didn't deter him. Instead, it thrilled him, as if he'd just stumbled upon a worthy opponent in a chess game he'd never played before. Their first meeting was arranged at one of New York's most upscale restaurants, where the soft glow of candlelight danced across silk-draped tables and the aroma of gourmet dishes filled the air. Ethan arrived early, settling into his usual spot, a vantage point where he could observe and assess his prey like a seasoned predator. But when Mia walked in, everything shifted. She wore a simple yet well-fitted dress, nothing flashy or ostentatious, and her calm demeanor threw him off balance. Mia wasn't intimidated by the opulence surrounding her, a reaction most people couldn't escape when stepping into his world. Instead, she strode straight to the table, her bright, resolute eyes locking onto his without a hint of hesitation. "You must be Ethan Carver," she said, her voice clear and steady, as if she'd been preparing for this moment for ages. Ethan flashed a restrained yet confident smile in return. "And you're definitely Mia Harper," he replied, extending his hand, a polite gesture but also a test. Mia glanced at it briefly before gripping it firmly, her handshake strong and assertive, signaling she wasn't one to be easily tamed. Cutting through any pretense, Mia sat down and got straight to the point. "We don't need to play games," she said, her bluntness catching Ethan off guard enough to make him raise an eyebrow. "I know about the bet, the terms, and what you're thinking." Her directness surprised him, though he masked it with his usual composed exterior. "And yet you still showed up," he countered, his tone tinged with curiosity, his gaze probing deeper. "What made you agree to this?" Mia paused, her eyes flickering with a hint of contemplation, as if weighing how much to reveal. After a moment she answered, "I have my own reasons. 6 months might feel short to you, but for me it's long enough to change a lot. Just know this, Ethan. I'm not someone you can order around or manipulate." Her words were sharp, but not hostile. They were a declaration of independence. Ethan let out a soft chuckle, not out of dismissal, but because he was starting to sense the thrill of this challenge. Mia was unlike anyone he'd ever met, unfazed by his aura, unafraid of his presence, and that made her a puzzle he was eager to unravel. As dinner drew to a close, Ethan left the restaurant with an unfamiliar sensation. He was used to imposing his will on others, but Mia had forced him to rethink his approach. She wasn't just a piece in this bet, she was a variable he couldn't yet predict. And rather than frustrating him, it fueled his excitement. In his mind, Mia Harper was no longer a stranger's name. She was a formidable opponent, someone he knew wouldn't bend easily to anyone, not even him. After their tense first encounter at the upscale restaurant, Ethan Carver and Mia Harper swiftly came to a clear agreement. For Ethan, it was just a temporary contract, 6 months to win the bet with Daniel and pocket $1 million. He viewed Mia through the lens of someone accustomed to bending everything to his will, convinced she'd eventually be swept up in the glamorous world he'd built. But Mia saw things entirely differently. From the outset, she set boundaries with unshakable resolve. "I don't need your money, and I couldn't care less about the lavish lifestyle you flaunt," she said, her tone calm yet cutting like a blade. Ethan studied her, trying to decipher her true intentions, but Mia's steady gaze revealed nothing beyond self-assurance. 6 months is 6 months, she continued, setting her teacup down with a gentle yet firm tap. "And when it's over, I'll walk away without changing a thing about myself." Ethan smirked, not out of doubt but because her stubbornness amused him. "Fine," he replied, his voice smooth but brimming with confidence. "Have it your way. After 6 months, we'll go our separate paths." Their second meeting unfolded in a setting starkly different from the first. Not a 5-star restaurant with dim lighting, but a modest little coffee shop tucked away on a quiet New York street. Mia had chosen the spot, and though Ethan was mildly surprised, he agreed to join her, curious to learn more about this woman who defied his every rule. When he arrived, Mia was already there, cradling a steaming cup of tea, her serene eyes watching the passers-by through the window. She looked up and greeted him with a faint smile, not as cold as before, but still maintaining a deliberate distance. "I figured you'd prefer somewhere fancier," she teased, her voice laced with subtle sarcasm as he took the seat across from her. Ethan shrugged, trying to appear at ease, despite feeling out of place in this unfamiliar setting. "A change can be nice sometimes," he said, though inwardly he knew he was attempting to adapt to her world, something he'd never done for anyone else. At first, their conversation stayed light, weather, hobbies, polite small talk that skimmed the surface. But true to her nature, Mia soon steered it elsewhere with her signature bluntness. "If we're really going through with this," she said, setting her teacup down and locking eyes with him, "I want to make a few things clear." Ethan tilted his head, waiting, sensing he was about to enter a game whose rules he didn't yet understand. "I'm not here for your money or your fame," Mia went on, her voice steady yet carrying an undeniable strength. "I want freedom. Even if we marry, I'll live my own life, not controlled or reshaped by you or anyone else." Ethan stared at her, struck for the first time by a sincerity he couldn't dismiss. Mia wasn't like the others who'd crossed his path, people either dazzled by his wealth or scheming to exploit it. She was her own person, needing no one to validate her worth. "So what do you want out of this?" Ethan asked, his tone now tinged with genuine curiosity rather than his usual arrogance. Mia smiled, a cryptic, almost chilling smile that sent a shiver down his spine. "Freedom," she answered without hesitation. "I want you to understand that, contract or not, I don't belong to you. My life is mine, and it won't change just because of a temporary marriage." Ethan nodded slowly, agreeing to her terms without protest. To him, this marriage was just part of the game. If Mia wanted her independence, he had no issue with that. But deep down, something unfamiliar stirred within him. Mia wasn't merely a player in his bet. She was someone he couldn't easily manipulate, and that realization left him both unsettled and intrigued. As they left the coffee shop, Ethan couldn't deny it. Though he wouldn't admit it aloud, Mia Harper was becoming a question he burned to answer. After their tense first encounter at the upscale restaurant, Ethan Carver and Mia Harper swiftly came to a clear agreement. For Ethan, it was just a temporary contract, 6 months to win the bet with Daniel and pocket $1 million. He viewed Mia through the lens of someone accustomed to bending everything to his will, convinced she'd eventually be swept up in the glamorous world he'd built. But Mia saw things entirely differently. From the outset, she set boundaries with unshakable resolve. "I don't need your money, and I couldn't care less about the lavish lifestyle you flaunt," she said, her tone calm yet cutting like a blade. Ethan studied her, trying to decipher her true intentions, but Mia's steady gaze revealed nothing beyond self-assurance. "6 months is 6 months," she continued, setting her teacup down with a gentle yet firm tap. "And when it's over, I'll walk away without changing a thing about myself." Ethan smirked, not out of doubt, but because her stubbornness amused him. "Fine," he replied, his voice smooth but brimming with confidence. "Have it your way. After 6 months, we'll go our separate paths." Their second meeting unfolded in a setting starkly different from the first. Not a 5-star restaurant with dim lighting, but a modest little coffee shop tucked away on a quiet New York street. Mia had chosen the spot, and though Ethan was mildly surprised, he agreed to join her, curious to learn more about this woman who defied his every rule. When he arrived, Mia was already there, cradling a steaming cup of tea, her serene eyes watching the passers-by through the window. She looked up and greeted him with a faint smile, not as cold as before, but still maintaining a deliberate distance. "I figured you'd prefer somewhere fancier," she teased, her voice laced with subtle sarcasm as he took the seat across from her. Ethan shrugged, trying to appear at ease despite feeling out of place in this unfamiliar setting. "A change can be nice sometimes," he said, though inwardly he knew he was attempting to adapt to her world, something he'd never done for anyone else. At first, their conversation stayed light. Weather, hobbies, polite small talk that skimmed the surface. But true to her nature, Mia soon steered it elsewhere with her signature bluntness. "If we're really going through with this," she said, setting her teacup down and locking eyes with him, "I want to make a few things clear." Ethan tilted his head, waiting, sensing he was about to enter a game whose rules he didn't yet understand. "I'm not here for your money or your fame," Mia went on, her voice steady yet carrying an undeniable strength. I want freedom. Even if we marry, I'll live my own life, not controlled or reshaped by you or anyone else. Ethan stared at her, struck for the first time by a sincerity he couldn't dismiss. Mia wasn't like the others who'd crossed his path, people either dazzled by his wealth or scheming to exploit it. She was her own person, needing no one to validate her worth. So what do you want out of this? Ethan asked, his tone now tinged with genuine curiosity rather than his usual arrogance. Mia smiled, a cryptic, almost chilling smile that sent a shiver down his spine. Freedom, she answered without hesitation. I want you to understand that, contract or not, I don't belong to you. My life is mine, and it won't change just because of a temporary marriage. Ethan nodded slowly, agreeing to her terms without protest. To him, this marriage was just part of the game. If Mia wanted her independence, he had no issue with that. But deep down, something unfamiliar stirred within him. Mia wasn't merely a player in his bet, she was someone he couldn't easily manipulate, and that realization left him both unsettled and intrigued. As they left the coffee shop, Ethan couldn't deny it. Though he wouldn't admit it aloud, Mia Harper was becoming a question he burned to answer. Time in Ethan Carver's sprawling penthouse stretched like a taut wire, inching closer to snapping with each passing day. What began as a marriage to Mia Harper, a mere game to win a bet, had morphed into a battle he couldn't control. Ethan had tried everything, from lavish gifts to cunning tactics aimed at breaking Mia's resolve. But she stood firm, an unbreachable fortress. Her resilience didn't just frustrate him, it unearthed a deep unease he'd never known before. He began to realize Mia wasn't just a piece in his wager. She was an enigma, a force he couldn't predict. Then, on a cold, rainy night, as the city lights blurred through the massive glass windows, everything shattered with a horrifying truth Ethan never saw coming. He stormed into the living room after a grueling day, his mind weighed down by his repeated failures to subdue Mia. She sat in an armchair, a book in hand, her distant gaze lost in another world. The air between them hung heavy, as if both sensed an impending storm. Ethan couldn't endure the oppressive silence any longer. Mia, he said, his voice stern but trembling with restraint. I need answers. I can't keep playing this game without knowing the truth. You have to tell me. Mia closed her book, setting it down deliberately, then looked up at him. Her eyes, usually calm and piercing, now flickered with an emotion Ethan couldn't name, pain mixed with ferocity. She gave a faint, bitter smile that chilled him to the bone. The truth, Ethan? She said, her voice low but sharp enough to slice through the room. You really want to know? Ethan nodded, unwavering, though his heart pounded with a gnawing dread. Mia rose and stepped closer, her gaze locking onto his as if piercing his very soul. You don't even know who I am, she began, her voice carrying an icy edge that cut deep. You've always seen people as pawns in your hands, but this time, Ethan, you're the pawn. I've been running this game from the start. A jolt shot down Ethan's spine, his usual confidence crumbling. He opened his mouth to speak, but Mia didn't give him the chance. Do you remember the name Harper? She pressed on, her tone growing sharper. Of course you don't. To you, it's just another name among the dozens of companies you've crushed. My father owned a small business, a decent man trying to provide for his family. Until you came along and destroyed everything. Ethan staggered back a step, his mind reeling as he sifted through memories. He'd closed countless deals, trampled over countless rivals to climb to the top, but the names and faces blurred together. Mia, he stammered, but she raised a hand, silencing his excuses. Don't, she growled, her anger erupting in every word. You took everything from my father, Ethan. He lost it all, and because of that, he took his own life. But that's not even the half of it. When my family was plunged into ruin, I was pregnant. The stress, the pain, the despair you caused, It made me lose my child." Her voice broke, tears streaming down her face, yet she didn't collapse. She stood there, fierce and brimming with resentment, confronting him like a living verdict. The ground seemed to crumble beneath Ethan's feet. Mia's words stabbed into his chest, tearing apart the pride he'd always worn like armor. He wanted to argue, to say it wasn't intentional, but every defense choked in his throat. "I've been planning this for years," Mia continued, her voice steadying into a chilling calm. "When I heard about the bet, I saw my chance. I didn't come to you to lose. I came to make you feel even a fraction of what I've endured. I wanted you to know what it's like to be manipulated, to lose control." Ethan stared at her, his body trembling. He'd always thought he held the reins, but now he saw he'd been ensnared in a game where Mia wrote the rules. And for the first time in his life, he felt fear, not of losing money, but of losing himself. After the devastating revelation from Mia Harper, Ethan Carver was no longer the smug man who had entered this marriage with unshakable pride. The truth about what he'd done, ruining Mia's family, driving her father to his death, and indirectly causing the loss of her unborn child, had pierced through the armor he'd built over years. The lavish penthouse in the heart of New York, once a monument to his power and triumph, now felt like an empty, suffocating void where he faced himself in utter solitude. He stood before the towering glass windows, gazing down at the twinkling city lights, but for the first time, they didn't evoke a sense of dominance. Instead, they flickered like silent accusations, reminding him of the lives he'd shattered without ever realizing it. Ethan knew an apology couldn't erase Mia's pain or rewrite the past. In the days that followed, he embarked on a journey of redemption, not to regain control, but to prove he could become someone different. He stepped away from his opulent office, abandoning important meetings, and began seeking out the victims of his ruthless past deals. His first stop was a modest house in the suburbs, home to a family he'd once driven into ruin. When Ethan knocked, a middle-aged man answered, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. "I'm Ethan Carver," he said, his voice low but sincere, "and I'm here to apologize." The man scoffed, his tone bitter. "Apologize? What good does that do now?" Ethan didn't argue. He simply bowed his head slightly. "I can't undo what happened," he replied, "but I want to help in any way I can." He offered compensation, not just money but real support to help the family rebuild. It was the first step in a series of efforts he hoped would mark the beginning of change. From a distance, Mia watched Ethan's every move. She said nothing, offered no reaction, but her cautious eyes tracked him relentlessly. Trust didn't come easily to her, nor was she ready to forgive based on a few early gestures. Her pain ran too deep, her walls too fortified to crumble after mere days. But Ethan didn't give up. He sought out others, small businesses he'd devoured, families whose livelihoods he'd stripped away in his climb to the top. He donated funds, set up support initiatives, and took the time to listen to their stories. With each encounter, the weight of his mistakes grew clearer, fueling him to keep going, not to soothe his conscience, but to become the man he'd never imagined he could be. One evening, as New York's sky blazed with a vivid orange hue, Mia stood on the penthouse balcony, a gentle breeze ruffling her hair. Ethan returned from another trip, his face weary but his eyes alight with a newfound resolve. He stepped out, keeping a respectful distance, careful not to invade her space. "How was today?" Mia asked unexpectedly, her voice soft yet still guarded. Ethan exhaled, a breath heavy with both exhaustion and hope. "Tough," he admitted, "but necessary. Every conversation, every apology. It feels like I'm getting closer to being a better person. Not just for you, Mia, but for myself." Mia turned to face him, her gaze no longer as cold as it once was. The fiery anger that had once defined her seemed to soften, giving way to a flicker of curiosity. perhaps even a hint of respect. "I can see that," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "I know you're trying, Ethan. I'm not sure if I can forget everything, but I can tell you're not the man I once thought you were." Her words washed over Ethan's chaotic mind like a cool breeze. He didn't dare hope for too much. But it was the first sign that Mia might be considering a new possibility. Not full forgiveness, but a chance for them both to move beyond the shadows of the past. Ethan nodded, saying nothing more, simply standing beside her in silence, feeling the subtle yet profound shift in their connection. He knew the road ahead was still long, but for the first time he believed he could reach its end. Not to win a bet, but to rediscover himself. As the 6 months of their temporary marriage drew to a close, the atmosphere in Ethan Carver's penthouse was no longer thick with confrontation or tense silence. Instead, a subtle shift had begun to weave its way into his relationship with Mia Harper. Ethan's relentless efforts to atone, seeking out past victims to apologize, dedicating time and money to mend the damage he'd caused, was starting to bear fruit. Mia, though still maintaining a certain distance, no longer regarded him with the cold disdain of before. She noticed the small changes in him, the way he came home weary, yet with eyes alight with determination, or how he gradually shed his controlling habits to listen and respect her more. Though she didn't voice it, Mia could sense that Ethan was no longer the arrogant man who'd strutted into her life with a foolish bet. Their moments together grew softer. One morning, as sunlight streamed through the towering windows, Ethan quietly prepared breakfast. A task he'd never bothered with before. He set a cup of black coffee, no sugar, in front of Mia, exactly how she liked it, then sat across from her without forcing his presence. Mia glanced at him, a faint smile flickering across her lips before she took a sip. They began to talk, not the strained clashes of old, but simple exchanges about the day before, the weather, or a book she was reading. Laughter occasionally slipped in, light and natural, as if they were rediscovering each other. Not as enemies, but as two people slowly finding common ground. Ethan felt it, and within him a new emotion took root. Not the drive to win, but a genuine love for Mia. As the final day of their 6-month agreement approached, Ethan resolved to make it a turning point. He prepared a special dinner in the penthouse, not ostentatious or extravagant like his past attempts, but warm and sincere. The table was set simply, adorned with candles and a bouquet of wildflowers he knew Mia adored. When she walked in, her eyes widened in surprise, but she didn't refuse. She took the seat across from him. Over dinner they talked more, deeper than ever before, sharing things they'd never opened up about. Ethan's heart raced as he looked at Mia, no longer the woman he'd sought to conquer, but the one he couldn't bear to lose. Finally, as the air grew still, he took a deep breath, his voice trembling with nerves. "Mia," he said, setting down his utensils and meeting her gaze, "I know our deal is almost over, but I don't want it to end here. I don't want us to end. I've fallen in love with you, truly, and I want us to keep going. Not because of a bet, not as a game, but because I want to be with you." Mia stared at him, her eyes widening in shock. She stayed silent for a moment, as if weighing every word he'd spoken. Ethan waited, his palms sweaty with anxiety, but he didn't press her. At last, Mia smiled. A gentle, heartfelt smile he'd never seen before. "Ethan," she replied, her voice soft yet steady, "I love you too. I never thought this could happen, but it did. And I want to try, not like before, but as a real beginning, as equals." Her words were like a beam of light piercing the darkness in Ethan's heart. He reached across the table, taking her hand, and for the first time, Mia didn't pull away. They sat there, hand in hand, basking in a pure happiness neither had thought possible after all they'd been through. From adversaries bound by a sham marriage, Ethan and Mia had become two souls who found each other in sincerity. What started as a 6-month twist of fate had laid the foundation for a profound love. As they left the table and stood by the window gazing out at the city, Ethan pulled Mia close, whispering, "Who'd have thought it all began with a bet?" Mia chuckled softly, resting her head on his shoulder. "Who'd have thought it would lead us here?" she replied. In that moment, they knew the future wouldn't be easy, but they were ready to face it. Not as rivals, but as a true couple, ready to write a new chapter together. As the 6-month temporary marriage between Ethan Carver and Mia Harper officially came to an end, something no one could have predicted unfolded. They didn't just overcome the wounds of the past, they discovered a new beginning, brimming with hope. After that fateful dinner where they confessed their love, their relationship shed the shackles of the bet and old resentments. Instead, Ethan and Mia began building a real life together, treating each other as partners, not adversaries. The penthouse in the heart of New York, once an arena of tension and control, transformed into a space of tender moments. Quiet mornings filled with laughter, evenings by the window gazing at the city lights, and heartfelt whispers replacing the cold silence of before. Ethan was no longer the arrogant man obsessed with winning. He'd learned to cherish Mia and all she brought into his life. Time passed, and one day Mia noticed subtle changes in her body. Mornings brought waves of nausea, a sensation she hadn't felt in years. At first, she chalked it up to fatigue, but when it persisted, she visited a doctor. The result left her stunned. She was pregnant. Back at the penthouse, Mia stood before the mirror, her hand resting lightly on her stomach, a flood of emotions surging within, joy tinged with a touch of fear, but above all, hope. She knew she had to tell Ethan, but she wanted the moment to be perfect. That evening, as he walked in with his usual warm smile, Mia took a deep breath and called him over. "Ethan," she said, her voice trembling, but her eyes shining, "I have something to tell you. I'm pregnant." Ethan froze, as if time itself had stopped. Then suddenly he burst into laughter, a loud, joyful sound mixed with tears. He rushed to her, wrapping her in a tight embrace, laughing and crying like a child. "Really? Mia, really?" he repeated, his voice breaking with emotion. She nodded, smiling through her own tears, and in that instant they both knew that every hardship they'd endured had led them to this new miracle. Ethan knelt down, placing his hand on her stomach, whispering, "This time, I'll do everything right." He looked up at her, his eyes brimming with resolve. "Mia, I want to marry you again. Not because of a bet, not for anything, but the fact that I love you and want to build this family with you." Mia gazed at him, her heart swelling at the sincerity in his words. "I want that too, Ethan," she replied, her voice gentle yet firm. "This time, it'll be a real start." Their second wedding wasn't a cold transaction or a lavish spectacle. It took place in a small, cozy setting with only close friends and family. No glittering chandeliers or extravagant decor, just Ethan and Mia, hand in hand, exchanging vows from the heart. Mia wore a simple white dress, her eyes glowing with happiness, while Ethan couldn't take his eyes off her, finally understanding the true meaning of love. As the ceremony ended, they stepped onto the dance floor, surrounded by the soft glow of candles. Ethan held Mia close, guiding her in a slow dance, feeling her heartbeat sync with his. "Who'd have thought," Mia whispered, resting her head against his chest. "It all started with a silly bet." Ethan chuckled softly, tightening his grip on her hand. "And who'd have thought," he replied, "it had become the best thing in my life." They swayed to the music, their eyes locked, knowing the future ahead wasn't just about redemption. It was a new journey of love and the little family soon to arrive. Ethan understood he still had much to prove, not just to Mia, but to himself and those he'd hurt. But now he had a greater purpose than ever. To be the husband Mia deserved and the father their child would be proud of. As the night drew to a close, they stood by the penthouse window, looking out at the city aglow with lights. Mia rested her hand on her stomach, feeling the new life growing within, while Ethan held her from behind, his heart full of hope. From a bet that seemed like a mere game, they had found each other, rising from the darkness into the light. A story not just of forgiveness, but of the rebirth of love and faith. Do you think Mia made the right choice in forgiving and marrying Ethan? Please share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your opinion. Your participation means so much to us. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more narratives like this. Thank you for watching.